Wendy wasn't supposed to look like that when she walked into Jeffrey's penthouse like a weapon wrapped in red silk. Like every forbidden thought he'd buried for 11 months suddenly materialized in his hallway, backlit by New York's glittering skyline. But when Jeffrey Bowers saw her, something inside him cracked. "Who?" he growled, stepping into her path, jaw locked tight enough to shatter. "Are you dressed up for?" He expected a name. He expected betrayal. He expected anything but the truth that would shatter his control and drag them both into a war neither of them saw coming. Because Wendy's answer wasn't about another man. It was about someone who wanted Jeffrey dead. The city lights beyond Jeffrey Bowers' floor-to-ceiling windows glittered like scattered diamonds across black velvet, 60 stories above the streets where empires rose and fell on his word alone. I stood at the bar in his private penthouse preparing his usual Scotch Macallan 25, 2 fingers, single ice sphere with the practiced precision of 11 months under his employment, though under felt like the wrong word, more like beside, or perhaps against, considering how often we clashed. "The Castellano contracts are on your desk," I said, without turning around, knowing he'd entered even though his footsteps made no sound on the Italian marble. Jeffrey Bowers moved like a predator, silent, purposeful, always aware of every living thing in his territory. "And before you ask, yes, I restructured the offshore accounts. No, I didn't ask permission. Yes, I was right to do it." Behind me, I heard the soft rustle of fabric as he loosened his tie, followed by the distinctive sound of his watch hitting the side table white gold Patek Philippe, the one that cost more than most people's cars. "You're particularly sharp-tongued tonight, Wendy." "It's 9:30, Mr. Bowers. I'm off the clock." I finished preparing his scotch exactly as he liked it and turned to face him. Jeffrey stood in the center of his domain like a dark king surveying territory he'd claimed through blood and calculation. Charcoal suit tailored so precisely it looked molded to his broad shoulders. Dark hair pushed back from a face that belonged on currency, all sharp angles and brutal elegance. A tattoo snaked up the side of his throat, partially hidden by his collar, the only visible hint of the violence that built his empire. But it was his eyes that always caught me off guard. Storm gray and relentlessly intelligent, capable of reading every micro-expression, every tiny tell, every secret I tried to keep. Those eyes tracked me now as I crossed the room, and I felt their weight like a physical touch trailing heat down my spine. I'd learned early in my employment that Jeffrey noticed everything. The way I twisted my grandmother's ring when nervous, how I held my breath before delivering bad news, the exact angle of my chin when I was preparing to defy him. "The meeting with the Delgado brothers is at midnight," I said, setting his scotch on the obsidian desk with perhaps more force than necessary. A single drop escaped, marring the polished surface. "I've prepared the briefing documents. Marcus will drive you." I paused, my heart beginning its familiar staccato whenever Jeffrey's attention fully focused on me. "I won't be here." His hand, reaching for the glass, froze midair. "Excuse me, I'm leaving early tonight." I kept my voice steady, professional, even as my pulse hammered against my throat. "I have plans." "Plans." He repeated the word as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. His fingers drummed once against the desk, an unusual tell of irritation from a man who'd built his reputation on absolute control. "What kind of plans?" "Personal ones." The silence that followed stretched like pulled wire, sharp enough to cut. Through the windows behind him, Manhattan sprawled in all its dangerous beauty, steel and glass and money and blood. From this height, in this office, Jeffrey Bowers surveyed an empire that extended far beyond the legitimate real estate holdings and import businesses listed on paper. Everyone knew what he really was, though no one said it aloud, not if they valued their continued existence. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our little dark romance family stretch across cities, countries, and time zones. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you leave here helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories and high-stakes betrayals together. Now, relax, grab your coffee, and enjoy this beautiful story. I'd learned the truth 3 months into my employment, accidentally intercepting a phone call I wasn't meant to hear. The smart thing would have been to quit immediately, to run far and fast from the dangerous world Jeffrey inhabited. Instead, I'd walked into his office the next morning, placed his coffee on his desk, and said, "The harbor shipment arrives Tuesday. You'll want the west dock, not the east. Fewer cameras." He'd stared at me for a full minute, those storm gray eyes calculating, weighing, deciding. "You're either very brave or very stupid, Miss Mathieson." "I'm practical, Mr. Bowers, and I make excellent coffee." Something had shifted between us in that moment, An understanding, perhaps. Or maybe just the acknowledgement that I'd stepped over a line and couldn't step back. Either way, I'd kept my job, my silence, and my growing addiction to the particular brand of chaos that was working for Jeffrey Bowers. Now he stood, moving around his desk with that predatory grace that made my breath catch. "Personal plans," he repeated, his voice dropping to that dangerous register that made grown men nervous. "With whom? That's really none of your business." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Everything about you is my business, Wendy. You work for me. I work for you from 9 to 6. What I do after hours is my own concern." I crossed my arms, a defensive gesture I immediately regretted when his gaze dropped briefly to the movement before returning to my face with something dark flickering in those gray depths. We stood too close now. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, something custom-made with notes of cedar and smoke. Close enough to see the thin scar along his jaw that spoke of violence in his past. Close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body like standing too near a fire. "You're wearing perfume," he observed softly, his eyes never leaving mine. "You never wear perfume to work." My pulse jumped. I dabbed on my favorite scent while getting ready vanilla and jasmine. The fact that he'd noticed, that he knew my routines well enough to identify this deviation, sent a flutter through my stomach that had nothing to do with fear. Perhaps I felt like it today. His eyes narrowed slightly, tracking over my face, my loose hair, the way my dress hugged my frame. "And your hair? You usually wear it up." My hand moved instinctively to the dark waves falling past my shoulders. I'd spent time with a curling iron tonight, something I rarely bothered with for the office. Jeffrey took another step closer, invading my space completely, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Where are you going, Wendy?" "I have a meeting, Mr. Bowers." I lifted my chin, meeting those dangerous eyes directly. "Is that acceptable to you, or do I need written permission to have a life outside these walls?" The temperature in the penthouse seemed to drop several degrees. Jeffrey's expression didn't change, he was too controlled for that, but something dark and possessive flickered in his storm-gray eyes. "A meeting." His voice was silk over steel. "At 9:30 at night. Wearing perfume." "Yes." "With whom?" I took a breath, knowing this next moment would change everything between us, knowing that what I was about to say would either save his life or end mine. "With someone who says they know who wants you dead." The words hung in the air like smoke. Jeffrey went absolutely still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. "Explain. Now. I intercepted a message this afternoon. Anonymous. They claimed to have proof of a traitor in your inner circle." I held his gaze, refusing to look away, even as fear and adrenaline flooded my system. "They demanded I come alone tonight. Said if I told you, they'd kill you first." For a long moment, Jeffrey said nothing. His eyes searched mine with an intensity that felt like being stripped bare. Then his hand moved fast, precise, gripping my wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough that I couldn't pull away. "And you were just going to walk into a trap alone?" His voice was low, dangerous, vibrating with barely contained fury. "Without telling me? Without backup?" "They said." "I don't care what they said." He pulled me closer, and suddenly we were inches apart, his breath warm against my face. "You don't make decisions about threats to my life, Wendy. You certainly don't throw yourself into danger for me." "Someone has to," I shot back. "You're not invincible, Jeffrey, no matter how much you pretend to be." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. His thumb moved against my wrist, finding my racing pulse. "How long have you known?" "Since this afternoon." "And you plan to handle it yourself?" It wasn't a question. His other hand came up, fingers sliding along my jaw, tilting my face toward the light. "This dress, the perfume, the hair, you weren't getting ready for them. You were getting ready to look strong, to look in control." I swallowed hard, hating that he could read me so easily. "I won't be your weakness, Jeffrey." His eyes darkened, and for a heartbeat, I thought he might kiss me. Instead, he released me suddenly, stepping back and pulling his phone from his pocket. "Marcus, cancel tonight's meeting. I have a different appointment to attend." He paused, his eyes never leaving mine. "And bring the car around. We're going out." "Jeffrey." He ended the call and slipped the phone away, moving to his closet. When he emerged, he was shrugging into a shoulder holster, the gun settling beneath his jacket with practiced ease. "They said if you come, they'll shoot you on sight," I said, my voice shakier than I wanted. Jeffrey crossed back to me, and this time when he touched me, His hand cupped my face with surprising gentleness. Then they'd better not see me. Transition to Chapter 1, Backstory. But to understand how we got here, how I became the woman standing in red silk, preparing to walk into an ambush for a man who terrified and fascinated me in equal measure, you need to know how this all began. 11 months earlier, on a winter morning when snow fell soft over Manhattan, I walked into Jeffrey Bauer's world for the first time, and from that very first moment, nothing was ever as simple as employer and assistant. The red silk dress slid over my skin like liquid fire, settling against curves I usually hid beneath tailored suits and professional armor. I stood in Jeffrey's guest room, the one he'd insisted I use after last night's revelation, watching my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror as Manhattan's twilight painted the sky in shades of amber, blood. I looked like I belonged to the city lights, to the glittering penthouses and champagne towers, not to the shadows where men like Jeffrey Bowers built empires on violence and loyalty. But tonight, I needed to look like I belonged anywhere but here. The day had been a blur of careful investigation. I'd traced the anonymous message through 3 proxy servers, cross-referenced the meeting location, a disused riverfront warehouse in Red Hook that supposedly operated as neutral ground, and memorized every exit route I could find on satellite maps. The small clutch in my hand held everything I might need: burner phone, USB drive, pepper spray, and a tracker that would ping Marcus if I didn't check in within the hour. Jeffrey thought I'd agreed to stay put, to let him handle this. He was wrong. I slipped into the hallway, my heels silent on the marble, pulse hammering as I approached the elevator. Just 10 more steps. 8. 5. Going somewhere? I froze. Jeffrey emerged from the shadows near his office like smoke taking human form, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms corded with muscle. His storm gray eyes tracked over me with predatory precision, taking in every detail, every carefully chosen piece of this carefully constructed lie. He moved between me and the elevator in 3 strides, his presence filling the space like a gathering storm. "Who," he said softly, dangerously, "are you dressed up for?" "Jeffrey." "Answer the question, Wendy." My chin lifted. "Personal plans. Like I said, personal plans." His voice dropped to that deadly register that made my breath catch. "In a dress that costs more than your monthly salary. Wearing heels you can barely run in." His eyes darkened. "Everything about you is my business. Where you go, who you see, who gets to look at you like this. I work for you, Mr. Bowers. I don't belong to you." Something flickered across his face, raw and possessive and barely contained. "Don't you?" The air between us crackled with tension. He stepped closer, and I saw it then, the way his hands trembled slightly at his sides. Not with anger, with something worse. Fear. "You're shaking," he said quietly, his fingers catching my wrist, thumb finding my racing pulse. "Who scared you?" "Wendy?" The gentleness in his voice almost broke me. "I'm not scared. You're terrified." His other hand came up, cupping my face with surprising tenderness. "I've watched you stare down men twice your size without flinching, but right now, your pulse is through the roof and you can't meet my eyes. So I'll ask you again, who? Scared? You." I tried to pull away. He wouldn't let me. "I have a meeting," I finally said, the words tasting like ash. "With someone who claims to know who wants you dead." The hallway went absolutely still. "You were going to walk into that alone?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but I heard the fury beneath it. The betrayal. "Without backup? Without telling me where you'd be? The message said if I told you, they'd kill you first. So you decided to sacrifice yourself instead?" His grip tightened on my wrist, not painful, but inescapable. "Did you think I wouldn't notice you were gone? Did you think I'd just let you disappear into the night wearing a target on your back? I can handle myself." "You shouldn't have to." The words exploded from him, raw and unguarded. Then, quieter, more devastating. "You shouldn't have to because I've had men protecting you for the last 4 months." I went cold. "What?" "Security detail. Rotating shifts. They follow you to work, to your apartment, to that little coffee shop you visit every Sunday." He released me suddenly, dragging a hand through his hair. "Rivals started noticing you 3 months in, asking questions, taking pictures. You've been spying on me? I've been keeping you alive." He stepped back, and for the first time since I'd known him, Jeffrey Bowers looked almost vulnerable. "Do you know what they'd do if they knew? If they understood what you mean to—" He cut himself off, jaw clenching. "I won't apologize for protecting what's mine. I'm not yours, Jeffrey. Aren't you?" His eyes met mine, and the heat in them could have melted steel. You think I don't notice? How you straighten my tie before meetings? How you stay late when you know I'm working? How you—" his voice cracked slightly. "How you were willing to walk into a trap tonight rather than risk my life?" The truth sat between us, heavy and dangerous. "If I don't go," I said quietly, "they might move tonight. They might strike while you're unguarded. Then I'm coming with you." Jeffrey, no. But he was already moving, pressing me back against the elevator wall, his body caging mine. Not threatening, protective. His hands framed my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. "You don't get to do this alone, Wendy. Not anymore. They said if you come, they'll shoot you on sight." His eyes turned lethal, cold, and calculating, and absolutely deadly. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of every violent thing he'd ever done, every enemy he'd ever buried. Then they'd better not see me. The warehouse smelled like rust and river water, every sound echoing off corrugated metal walls that stretched into darkness. My heels clicked against concrete as I stepped inside, the red silk dress suddenly feeling less like armor and more like a beacon screaming target. Jeffrey's driver had dropped me 2 blocks away as instructed, disappearing into shadows while I walked the final distance alone. But I knew he was watching, and I knew Jeffrey was closer than anyone suspected. The man waiting for me stood beneath a single flickering bulb, face half hidden by shadow. "Miss Mathieson, you came alone. I did what you asked." My voice echoed too loud in the cavernous space. "Now, tell me who the traitor is." He smiled wrong, predatory. "The traitor? There is no traitor, sweetheart." Metal doors slammed shut on all sides. Men emerged from the darkness like wolves, at least a dozen, weapons drawn and glinting in the dim light. The distant sound of water lapping against pylons suddenly felt like a countdown to something terrible. "Harrow Syndicate," I whispered, recognition hitting like ice water. "Smart girl." The man who'd lured me here stepped closer. "Bauer's pretty little weakness. Do you know how long we've been watching you? How easy it was to figure out what you mean to him?" My hand moved instinctively toward the clutch at my side. 3 guns immediately trained on me. "I wouldn't. This was never about a traitor," I said, pulse hammering. "This was always about leverage. Now she understands." He circled me slowly, predatory. "Jeffrey Bowers is a hard man to hurt, but everyone has a weakness. And you, darling, are his." The informant, the one who'd sent the message, suddenly pressed something cold into my palm. A flash drive. His lips barely moved as he whispered, "Not all of us chose this side." Before I could react, the leader grabbed my arm, yanking me against him. Cold metal pressed against my temple. "Let's see if Bowers values his empire more than his—" Darkness exploded. The warehouse erupted into chaos, muzzle flashes lighting the space like lightning, the thunder of gunfire deafening. Jeffrey's men poured in from every entrance, moving with lethal precision, and at the center of it all, like a dark angel of death, was Jeffrey himself. He moved the way I'd always suspected he could, fluid, deadly, every motion calculated to kill. Men fell before him, but his eyes never stopped scanning, searching, until they found me. The harrow holding me dug the gun harder into my temple. "One more step, Bowers, and I paint the walls with her brains." Jeffrey froze. Every gun in the warehouse swiveled toward us, his men waiting for orders. The tactical advantage was his one word and they'd take the shot, even if it meant risking me. But Jeffrey's eyes met mine, and I saw something crack in that storm-gray gaze. "Touch her again," he snarled, his voice dropping to something inhuman, something ancient and terrible. "And I'll bury your entire bloodline. I'll find every cousin, every aunt, every child who shares your name, and I'll erase them from existence." "Jeffrey, don't," I started. "Shoot me if you want," he continued, taking a deliberate step forward. "But you'll be dead before my body hits the ground, and everyone you've ever loved will follow." The harrow's hand trembled. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Jeffrey's smile was death itself. "Ask yourself if you really want to test that theory." The moment stretched like pulled wire, then snapped. The harrow shoved me forward. I stumbled, and Jeffrey caught me, spinning us behind a concrete pillar as gunfire exploded again. His body covered mine, protective, absolute. When the shooting stopped, 6 harrows lay dead. The rest had fled. Jeffrey pulled back, hands gripping my face, his eyes wild. "Are you hurt? Did they—" "I'm fine," I gasped, but I was shaking, adrenaline crashing through me like poison. "You're not fine." His thumb traced my cheek, came away with someone else's blood. "You're never doing that again. Never." "Jeffrey, I can't." His voice cracked. "I can't lose you, Wendy." Then his mouth was on mine, desperate, terrifying. claiming. The kiss tasted like gunpowder and fear, and something raw that had been building between us for 11 months. When we broke apart, both of us were breathing hard. Jeffrey turned to his men, voice cold again. Burn this place. They don't get to remember where they touched her. As flames began to lick at the warehouse walls, I clutched the flash drive tighter, knowing with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning. Jeffrey's penthouse felt different at 3 in the morning, quieter, more intimate, the city lights beyond the windows, softer somehow. I sat curled in his desk chair, drowning in his white dress shirt that still smelled like cedar and smoke, the fabric hanging to mid-thigh. My red lipstick was smudged across my mouth, a visible reminder of the kiss that had changed everything. The flash drive glowed in the laptop's port like a tiny bomb waiting to detonate. Anything? Jeffrey's voice came from behind me, rough with exhaustion. He'd showered, changed into dark pants and a black Henley, but his knuckles were still bruised from the warehouse. Financial records. Partial. Encoded. I scrolled through streams of numbers and dates. Someone's been feeding information to the Harrows for months. Meeting locations, shipment times, security rotations. His jaw tightened. How long? At least 6 months, maybe longer. The penthouse door opened without warning. Marcus Hale strode in, Jeffrey's right-hand man for the past 5 years, broad-shouldered, easy smile, the kind of loyal that felt like bedrock. But something about his timing made my skin prickle. Boss. Heard about the warehouse. His eyes flicked to me, lingered on Jeffrey's shirt wrapped around my frame. Everyone okay? We're fine. Jeffrey's voice was controlled, careful. Harrows won't be a problem tonight. Good. I've got the security reports you wanted. Marcus dropped a file on the desk. His movements relaxed, unhurried. Too relaxed for a man whose boss had just survived an ambush. After he left, I returned to the files, cross-referencing dates with events I remembered. A shipment intercepted in July. The data breach happened 2 days before. A meeting compromised in September leaked the same week. Every incident traced back through a pattern of coded transfers. And every transfer originated from an account I'd seen before, buried in Jeffrey's own financial records. No. Jeffrey stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. Not Marcus. Jeffrey, he's been with me since the beginning. Saved my life in Chicago. Took a bullet meant for me in Boston. His hands gripped the back of my chair. I trust him with everything. Look at the dates. I pulled up the transaction history. Every leak corresponds with a deposit into this offshore account. The routing numbers could be fabricated, planted to sow distrust, or they could be real. I turned to face him, and the pain in his eyes nearly broke me. I know what he means to you, but we have to consider. I won't believe it. He stepped back, dragging a hand through his hair. Not without proof, real proof. The argument shifted then, morphing into something deeper. You're staying here, Jeffrey said suddenly, until we figure this out. No arguments. You can't just order me to. I can, and I am. His voice dropped to that possessive register. Do you understand what tonight meant? They know about you now. Every rival family, every enemy I've ever made. You're not safe anywhere but here. So I'm a prisoner? You're protected. He crossed to me in 2 strides, cupping my face. There's a difference. Is there? But my voice lacked conviction, because his thumb was tracing my cheekbone, and I could still taste him on my lips. Stay, he whispered. Please. I stayed. Hours later, after Jeffrey had finally fallen asleep in his bedroom, I crept back to the laptop. The encoded files stared back at me, mocking, hiding secrets that could destroy the man I couldn't finish that thought. Not yet. My fingers flew across the keyboard, running decryption algorithms I'd learned during my brief stint in grad school before financial reality had pulled me into the working world. One file resisted, locked behind layers of security. At 4:47 a.m., it cracked. Account records spilled across the screen. Transfers, dates, amounts. And at the center of it all, a name that made my blood run cold. Marcus Hale. Direct deposits from Harrow shell companies. Payments corresponding to every piece of leaked intel. 6 months of betrayal. Documented and undeniable. I stared at the screen, knowing that showing this to Jeffrey would break something fundamental inside him, that it would shatter the foundation of trust he'd built his empire on. But keeping it from him would get us both killed. You're not going to like this, Jeffrey, I whispered to the empty room, my reflection ghostly in the window glass. Behind me, I didn't hear the bedroom door open. Didn't see Jeffrey standing in the shadows, watching. Didn't know that he'd heard every word. I woke to chaos, Jeffrey's phone had been ringing for 20 minutes straight, voices shouting through the speaker, the kind of panic that preceded wars. I stumbled from the guest room to find him standing at the windows, silhouetted against the dawn, every line of his body rigid with tension. What happened? He didn't turn. Victor Harrow is dead. The words hit like physical blows. Victor Harrow, patriarch of the Harrow Syndicate, the man who'd ordered last night's ambush. When? 3 hours ago. Single shot, professional hit. Jeffrey's voice was hollow. They found my calling card at the scene. Security footage shows one of my cars 2 blocks away at the time of death. That's impossible. You were here. I know where I was, Wendy. He finally turned, and the look in his eyes chilled me. Someone is setting me up, and they're doing a damn good job of it. His phone buzzed again. He silenced it without looking. The Harrow heir? I asked, swearing vengeance. Half the families are already choosing sides. He moved to the bar, poured himself 3 fingers of scotch despite the early hour. By tonight, we'll be at war. Unless we prove you didn't do it. Proof doesn't matter in this world. Perception does. He downed the scotch in one swallow. And right now, every family in New York thinks I executed Victor Harrow. I started toward him, but he held up a hand. Pack a bag. You're leaving in 10 minutes. Jeffrey, the Harrows know about you now. They just lost their patriarch, and you're the easiest way to hurt me. His voice cracked slightly. I won't let them touch you. As if summoning his words into reality, his phone lit up with a video message. Security footage from the cafe 3 blocks away, the one I visited every morning for their lavender latte. 3 men, Harrow soldiers, waiting by my usual table. They're already hunting you, Jeffrey said quietly. The safe house was a fortress disguised as a luxury apartment in Tribeca. Bulletproof windows, reinforced doors, enough security to protect a head of state. Jeffrey's men swept every room before allowing me inside, then posted guards at every entrance. I felt like a bird in a gilded cage. How long? I asked, as Jeffrey checked the locks personally. As long as it takes. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He turned to face me, and exhaustion lined his features. I need to know you're safe, Wendy. I can't think, can't plan, can't fight, if I'm terrified they'll get to you. So I just hide while you start a war? Yes. The single word detonated between us. You don't get to make that choice for me. My voice rose, months of frustration finally breaking through. You've been making choices for me since the beginning. Surveillance I never asked for. Protection I never wanted. Protection that kept you alive. He closed the distance between us, hands gripping my shoulders. Do you think I enjoyed it? Watching you from a distance? Having men report your every movement like some paranoid dictator? Then why did you? His hands trembled against my shoulders. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. Because people like me don't get to love someone openly. We don't get to hold hands in public or introduce you at parties. Everything I touch turns to violence. His forehead pressed against mine. So I loved you the only way I knew how. From the shadows, through security details and encrypted messages to men I trusted to keep you breathing. The confession hung between us, raw and devastating. Jeffrey, I will start a war for you, Wendy. I will burn every family in this city to ash before I let them take you from me. His thumbs brushed my cheekbones. Even if you hate me for caging you, even if you never forgive me, you'll be alive to hate me, and that's enough. He left me in the master bedroom, the lock clicking into place from the outside. I stood there for a long moment, processing his words, the weight of his confession. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the encrypted files from the flash drive, and made a silent vow. Someone was orchestrating this entire nightmare, the betrayal, the assassination, the frame job. Someone wanted Jeffrey and the Harrows to destroy each other, and I was going to find them, even if I had to tear apart every file, every transaction, every hidden truth to do it. 72 hours locked in the safe house, and I'd memorized every crack in the ceiling, every sound the building made as it settled. But I'd also done something more useful. I'd torn apart every encrypted file on that flash drive until the truth bled out across my screen. The payments didn't add up. Not at first. Marcus Hale had received money from Harrow accounts, that much was clear. But when I traced the Harrow payments backward, they didn't originate from Victor Harrow's known holdings. They came from a shell company buried 3 layers deep. A shell company that also paid the Harrows. Someone's funding both sides. I whispered to the empty room, pulse quickening. I spent the next 6 hours following the digital breadcrumbs account numbers that led to other accounts, transactions disguised as legitimate business. money flowing like water through a carefully constructed maze. And at the center of it all, the Castellano Group, not one of the major families. A smaller syndicate, underestimated, operating in the shadows while giants fought above them. My fingers flew across the keyboard, adrenaline sharpening my focus. I found the ledger first, meticulous records of payments to Marcus, payments to Harrow lieutenants, even the cost of the hitman who'd killed Victor Harrow. Everything documented with chilling precision. Then I found the voice recording. Eliminate both families simultaneously. Let Bowers and Harrow destroy each other, then move into the vacuum. The woman is the key. If we can. The recording cut off, but I'd heard enough. They'd orchestrated everything. The betrayal, the ambush, Victor's assassination. All of it designed to ignite a war that would leave the Castellanos standing alone atop the ashes. I had to get this to Jeffrey. But the guards outside my door had orders: no communication, no exceptions. I tried the direct approach first, calling out that I needed to make a phone call. The guard's response was polite, but immovable. "Mr. Bowers' orders, ma'am." I needed a different strategy. 20 minutes later, I'd convinced the younger guard that I needed aspirin from the pharmacy down the block. "Woman problems," I'd said, watching him flush with discomfort. "Unless you'd prefer I describe them in detail?" He'd caved, calling for a car, insisting on escort protocol. The mistake was letting me near windows. I saw them as we descended to the parking garage, 2 men in a black sedan, Harrow tattoos visible on their knuckles as they scanned the building's entrance. My breath caught. They were hunting, systematic, checking every property Jeffrey owned. "We need to move," I told the guard. "Now." We switched to a secondary vehicle, took a different exit, but the close call had my hands shaking as I clutched my phone, Jeffrey's data burning on the USB drive in my pocket. I didn't go to the pharmacy. Instead, I had the driver take me to a secure location I'd memorized from Jeffrey's files. A private office he used for meetings he wanted no record of. I bypassed his guards by sending Marcus a message from Jeffrey's encrypted channel. "Bringing the woman here. Secure the location." Marcus would think Jeffrey sent it. Jeffrey's men would think Marcus authorized it. By the time anyone realized the deception, I was inside, uploading files to Jeffrey's secure server and sending him an encrypted message. "I know who's orchestrating this. Third party. The Castellanos. I have proof ledgers, recordings, everything. Don't make any moves until you see this. And Jeffrey, I'm done hiding. When you confront them, I'm there. Non-negotiable. W." The reply came within minutes, his private line calling. "Wendy." His voice was raw, strained. "Where the hell are you? Did you get the files? I'm looking at them now." A pause, then something that might have been awe. "Christ, the Castellanos. They've been playing us against each other for months. They wanted you both gone. Thought they could rule the rubble. If what you found is real." He stopped, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a different weight. "You didn't just save me, Wendy. You just changed the war. So I get a seat at the table? You get whatever you want." Another pause. "But first, you're going to tell me how you escaped a secure safe house, bypassed 4 trained guards, and hacked into my private server." Despite everything, I smiled. "I learned from the best, Mr. Bowers." His low laugh echoed through the line, dark and promising. "Get back to the safe house. We have a meeting to plan." The Metropolitan Club's private ballroom had witnessed a century of power plays, but nothing like this. Every major family in New York gathered under crystal chandeliers that cast shadows across faces hardened by violence and ambition. Armed guards lined the walls, neutral security, the only reason anyone had agreed to come. Jeffrey stood at the head of the table like a dark king holding court, flanked by his lieutenants. Marcus Hale stood to his right, loyal as always, unaware that his world was about to implode. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I'd made my case, and Jeffrey had finally relented with a warning that still echoed in my ears. "Stay behind me. If shooting starts, you run." Now, I stood in the shadows near the entrance, wearing a black dress that blended with the darkness. Every eye in the room pretending not to notice Jeffrey Bowers had brought a woman to a meeting of wolves. "You have nerve showing your face here, Bowers." The Harrow heir, Victor's son. James leaned forward, knuckles white against the table. Young, angry, drowning in grief and rage. "My father's blood is still warm, and you dare call this meeting?" "I called it because your father was murdered by someone who wanted us at each other's throats." Jeffrey's voice cut through the murmurs. "Someone who benefits from our war. Convenient story." James's hand moved toward his jacket. A dozen guns immediately trained on him. "You left your calling card at the scene. Your car on the footage. Fabricated evidence. Jeffrey slid a tablet across the table. The security footage was edited. The timestamps don't match satellite data. The calling card was one reported stolen from my office 3 months ago. Suspicious murmurs rippled through the room. The neutral families exchanged glances, recalculating allegiances. This proves nothing, James snarled. You could have fabricated this just as easily. He didn't. My voice rang out across the ballroom before I could stop myself. Every head turned. Jeffrey's jaw tightened, but he didn't order me back. Instead, he shifted slightly, making space beside him. An invitation. A claim. I stepped into the light. My name is Wendy Matheson. I work for Mr. Bowers, and I'm the one who uncovered the real conspiracy. I pulled the USB drive from my clutch, connecting it to the room's display system. The Harrows didn't just target Jeffrey. They were targeted too. Financial records flooded the screens. Payments, dates, account numbers. These transactions show a third party funding both sides, paying for information, orchestrating conflicts, even financing the hit on Victor Harrow. I met James's eyes. Your father was murdered to start a war. You were both played. By who? Someone demanded. The Castellano Group. I pulled up the ledger. They've been operating in the shadows, waiting for you to destroy each other so they could take over. And how did they get their information? James's voice was deadly quiet. Someone had to feed them intel from inside Bowers' organization. The room went silent. Jeffrey's voice was ice. Marcus. Marcus Hale went pale. Boss, I don't know what. Every leak corresponds to deposits in your offshore account. I advanced the presentation. 6 months of betrayal. Every ambush, every intercepted shipment, every compromised location, you sold them all. That's a lie. Marcus backed toward the wall, hands sliding toward his weapon. She's trying to frame me, then explain the recordings. I played the audio file. Marcus's voice, crystal clear, discussing payment schedules with Castellano representatives. Marcus's gun cleared his holster. Jeffrey moved faster, catching his wrist, twisting until bones cracked and the weapon clattered to marble. The room erupted, 30 guns drawn, every family poised on the edge of massacre. Wait! Jeffrey's command froze them all. He forced Marcus to his knees, voice carrying absolute authority. He dies when I say, not before he tells us everything. Marcus struggled, then collapsed, the fight draining out of him. The Castellanos approached me 8 months ago, promised me a seat at the table when it was over, said I'd run the city. And you believed them? Jeffrey's disgust was palpable. I was tired of being second. Marcus spat blood. Tired of watching you build an empire while I took bullets for you. Where are the Castellano representatives? James interrupted, gun still trained on Jeffrey's chest. If this is real, where are they? Jeffrey nodded to his men. They dragged 3 figures from a side room, Castellano lieutenants. Already beaten, already broken. The room shifted. Alliances recalculated in real time. James Harrow stared at the evidence, at the men who'd orchestrated his father's death, at Jeffrey standing calm and controlled at the center of it all. Slowly, impossibly, he lowered his gun. If what he says is true, James said quietly, eyes never leaving Jeffrey's, then our enemy isn't each other. The war paused. But in that ballroom, with blood on the floor and guns still drawn, everyone knew this was only the beginning. The Castellano group fell in 48 hours. Jeffrey moved with surgical precision, assets frozen, properties seized, key members arrested on charges that would ensure they'd never see daylight again. The few who resisted simply disappeared, their names added to the long list of people who'd underestimated Jeffrey Bowers and paid the ultimate price. I watched it unfold from the penthouse, tracking news reports and encrypted messages, witnessing the systematic dismantling of an organization that had nearly destroyed us both. Marcus was the last piece. You don't have to be here for this, Jeffrey said quietly, standing in the doorway of his office. Beyond him, I could see Marcus bound to a chair, blood already staining his shirt from the interrogation. I can have someone take you upstairs. I met his eyes, understanding what he was really asking. This was the line. Once I crossed it, once I witnessed this kind of justice, there was no pretending I didn't know what Jeffrey was, what his world demanded. I'm staying. My voice didn't waver. Not for the violence, for the closure. Something flickered in his gaze, respect, maybe, or relief that I finally understood. Marcus didn't beg, didn't plead for mercy he knew he'd never receive. He just looked at Jeffrey with something like regret and said, I'm sorry it had to be this way, boss. Jeffrey's response was cold, final. So am I. I turned away before the end. Not out of weakness, but because I'd seen enough. Because staying meant bearing witness, not glorifying violence. Hours later, the penthouse felt different, quieter. The war was over, the threats neutralized, but the silence between Jeffrey and me stretched heavy with unspoken words. We stood at the windows where this had all begun, the city lights painting shadows across his face. He'd showered, changed into simple black pants and a white shirt, but exhaustion lined his features. "It's done," he said quietly. "The Castellanos are finished. Marcus is, handled. The other families have agreed to peace. And now? Now you decide if you can live with what you've seen." He turned to face me, vulnerability stark in his storm-gray eyes. "If you can live with what I am. I've known what you are since month 3, Jeffrey. Knowing and accepting are different things." He stepped closer, hands gentle as they framed my face. "I need you to understand I've been in love with you since that first board meeting, when you called the Valentino deal short-sighted and reckless, right in front of 12 men who'd never dared question me." A surprised laugh escaped me. "You wanted to fire me. I wanted to kiss you." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "But I settled for falling deeper every day you stayed. Every time you pushed back. Every moment you made me better without even trying. Jeffrey, I notice everything about you, Wendy. How you take your coffee. How you twist your ring when you're nervous. How you bite your lip when you're solving a problem." His voice dropped, rough with emotion. "How you stayed even when you learned the truth. How you walked into danger to save me. How you're still here after everything." My hands pressed against his chest, feeling his heartbeat thunder beneath my palms. "I'm falling for you too," I whispered. "Not the myth or the monster everyone else sees. The man who noticed when I skipped lunch and had food delivered. Who sent my favorite pastries without ever saying a word. Who protects people he loves the only way he knows how. Can you live in this world?" He asked the question like it was ripped from somewhere deep. "Really live in it? Because I can't go back to just watching you from a distance. Can't go back to pretending you're just my assistant. And I can't be a trophy you hide away for safety. I know." His forehead pressed against mine. "If you stay, it's as my partner, my equal, not something I protect someone who stands beside me, even when it's dangerous, especially then." He pulled back enough to meet my eyes. "But you need to understand there's no normal after this. No going back to coffee shops and ordinary Sundays. My enemies become your enemies. My choices become yours." The weight of it settled between us, the reality of what he was offering, what I'd be choosing. "If I tell you there's no way back to normal after this," Jeffrey said softly, his hands trembling slightly against my face, "would you still choose me?" I stood there, the city glittering behind him, his heart beating against my palms, and knew my answer would change everything. But I didn't speak it. Not yet. Instead, I let the question hang in the air between us, heavy with promise and possibility and the terrifying certainty that whatever I said next would seal both our fates. 3 weeks. 21 days since the meeting at the Metropolitan Club, since Marcus's betrayal was exposed, since the Castellano group fell, and the underworld found its uneasy peace. The city had settled into a new rhythm, alliances redrawn, territories renegotiated, Jeffrey's empire standing stronger than before. And through it all, I'd stood beside him. Not behind, not hidden away for safety. Beside him, where I'd always belonged. I heard Jeffrey's key in the lock at midnight, his footsteps crossing the marble foyer. He'd been in meetings all evening, the kind that required him to be the cold, calculating predator the city feared. But when he stepped into the penthouse and saw me, he froze. I stood by the windows in the red silk dress, the same one I'd worn that night at the warehouse. The same one that had started everything. Candles flickered across surfaces, casting dancing shadows, and Manhattan glittered beyond the glass like scattered stars. Jeffrey's briefcase hit the floor. "Wendy," his voice caught, rough with something between memory and longing. I watched him struggle with the ghosts of that night, the warehouse, the guns, the terror of almost losing me. His hands flexed at his sides, and I saw the exact moment he remembered. "Who?" he said softly, echoing words that had changed everything between us. "Are you dressed up for?" I crossed to him slowly, each step deliberate. When I reached him, I took his hand and placed it against my heart, letting him feel it racing beneath the silk. "You asked me that once," I whispered. "Before everything. Before the bullets and the lies and the blood. Before I knew how far I'd go for you. Before I understood what it meant to love someone in a world like this." His breath hitched, fingers spreading across my ribcage. I'm dressed up for you, Jeffrey. I held his gaze, letting him see every truth I'd been holding back. It was always you. The words hung between us, years of tension and fear, and wanting finally given voice. I choose you, I continued. Your world, your darkness, your enemies, all of it. Eyes wide open, no illusions, no going back. His other hand came up, cupping my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything he was. My worst fear, he said, voice breaking slightly, has always been loving someone I could lose, someone who could be taken from me, used against me. I know, but losing you would destroy me worse than any bullet. His thumb traced my cheekbone. So I'm asking you, begging you to stay, not as my assistant, not as someone I protect from a distance. His forehead pressed against mine. As the woman I will burn this city to protect, as my partner, my equal, my everything. I finished for him. Everything, he agreed. Then his mouth found mine, not desperate like that first kiss in the warehouse, not explosive like the moment after I'd nearly died. This was deliberate, a promise, a vow sealed with every breath we shared. When we finally broke apart, we stood wrapped in each other, the city lights painting us in gold and shadow. His white shirt contrasted with my red silk, two opposing forces that had found their balance. I love you, I whispered against his throat. I love you, he answered, the words like a confession torn from somewhere deep. God help me. I love you more than I've ever loved anything in this goddamn world. We turned to face the windows together, his arms wrapped around me from behind, my back against his chest. From 60 stories up, New York sprawled before us, beautiful and brutal, exactly like the life we'd chosen. Two dangerous people who'd found something more dangerous than power or violence or control. We'd found each other, and in Jeffrey's world, where weakness was death and sentiment was suicide, love had become our sharpest weapon, our greatest strength, the one thing no enemy could take and no threat could destroy. Because we'd chosen it, together, eyes wide open. The first time Jeffrey saw me in that red dress, jealousy nearly destroyed him, raw and possessive and terrifying. The second time, it ruined him in a different way. Because now, there was no version of his future that didn't have me in it. No empire worth building without me beside him. No life worth living if I wasn't in it. And as Manhattan glittered before us like a kingdom we'd conquered together, Jeffrey pressed a kiss to my temple and whispered the words that sealed our fate. Always you, Wendy. From that first day, until my last breath, always you.